Dawn broke quiet over the Tennessee hills, the kind of silence only a man who owns every inch of the land around him can appreciate. The mist hung low over the lake, and the only sound was the slow drip of dew from the porch roof into the wet earth below. He sat there on his porch, boots propped on the railing, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug. This lakefront ranch wasn't just a house, it was legacy. Built by his grandfather's hands, weathered by decades of storms and past. Down like a promise, this land was his birthright, 50 acres of pine creek beds, and open sky. It was the one place in the world where he could breathe. That's when he heard it, the crunch of tires on gravel, slow and deliberate, shattering the morning calm. He set the mug down and listened. 3 black SUVs crawled up the long drive, their glossy paint catching the first pale rays of sunlight. They moved like a swarm of corporate beetles, out of place in this wild country. He knew who they were before they even parked. The HOA security team, as they called themselves. He called them what they were, thugs for the HOA. They'd been a thorn in his side for nearly a year now. Ever since the fancy McMansion development down the road realized their property line barely touched one corner of his woods. And ever since they'd been trying to tell him what to do with his land, first came the letters. Thinly veiled complaints about unauthorized structures and visual pollution from his dock. Then came the fines, ridiculous amounts he ignored. Then came threats. He figured they'd get bored eventually. He was wrong. The SUVs stopped 20 feet from his porch, doors swinging open in unison. 6 men stepped out, dressed in black combat boots and matching polos with HOA security stamped in bold white letters. Radios clipped to their shoulders, sunglasses hiding their eyes. They looked like they were about to raid a cartel compound, not step onto a man's property in rural Tennessee. One of them, clipboard in hand, started forward. He didn't move, just sat there, calm as stone, watching them close in. "Sir," the clipboard guy said, voice too loud for the quiet morning, "we're here to enforce HOA compliance protocols. You are in violation." A slow grin tugged at the corners of his mouth. "You're about 6 miles outside your jurisdiction, son," he said, his voice low, gravelly. "We have authority to inspect." That's when he stood up. 6-foot-3, built like a tree trunk, former Army Ranger. The porch boards creaked. Under his weight, as he stepped forward, his shadow stretched long in the rising sun. "Leave my property. Now." They didn't. One of them tried to shoulder past him toward the boathouse. The first hand that grabbed his arm was the last mistake they made that morning. He moved like a switchblade, snapping open. Twisting, he planted a knee in the man's thigh and swept him down hard onto the gravel. The man screamed. The next one reached for something on his belt, pepper spray maybe, but didn't get the chance to use it. The rancher closed the gap, locked his wrist, and drove an elbow into his ribs. The man crumpled, wheezing, the last. One froze, then bolted for the SUV. He let him go. The 2 on the ground crawled, groaning, one clutching his shin like it had snapped. He crossed his arms and watched, impassive, as they limped back to their vehicles. Clipboard guy tried to save face, snarling through the pain. "You assaulted us. We'll press charges." He tilted his head, eyes cold. "No, son. You trespassed on private land and laid hands on me. What I did was self-defense. The sheriff knows me a hell of a lot better than he knows you." They left without another word, one SUV's front bumper scraping against the gate as they peeled out. Might have left a couple of Cal troops hidden there for good measure. When they were gone, he dialed Sheriff Danner. Small-town law. A man who'd sat at this porch many times for coffee and deer jerky. "HOA security just tried to detain me on my own land," he said flatly. "2 of Mr. Limping. You might get a call." "You serious? Is a heart attack?" Danner didn't scold him. Didn't even sound surprised. "All right, don't talk to anyone else. If they file, we'll handle it. Between you and me, they crossed the line." The line had been crossed long before today. This was just the first time they'd done it wearing fake badges, and now it was war. For a week, the world was quiet. No SUVs, no letters, no harassment. But he knew better. Bullies don't stop when you hit back, they regroup. The call came one evening from a neighbor whose house backed near the development. "Saw a couple fellas poking around your property line," she whispered. Flashlights, clipboards, cameras. They were hiding by the lake. He didn't get mad. He got creative. That night, under a moonless sky, he went to work. Motion sensors hidden near the boathouse. Floodlights rigged to explode into daylight. At the first step, Bluetooth speaker tucked under the deck, loaded with angry bull snorts. And, for good measure, an old strip of fencing half buried in leaves where no city boy would expect it. 2 nights later, they came. 2 men in khakis and vests sneaking through the underbrush like raccoons, muttering to each other about evidence and violations. They hit the motion sensor. Bam, floodlights blazed. The hidden speaker roared with the sound of a charging bull. One screamed. The other tripped on the fencing, flew forward, and splashed headlong into the lake. The first one dropped his flashlight and bolted. He watched it all live on his phone, chuckling quietly to himself. The next morning, the video went online. HOA inspectors learn what happens when you trespass on a ranch. It went viral in hours. Local news picked it up. Comments poured in support, laughter, and plenty of folks sharing their own HOA horror stories. Even Sheriff Danner called, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. But the HOA wasn't laughing. They came back with lawyers. The man in the pressed suit showed up at his gate with papers in hand, smirk plastered on his face like armor. "You've been served," he said, holding out the envelope. "Trespassing, assault, emotional distress, destruction of property. You'll be hearing from us in court," the rancher smiled. "Oh, I'm counting on it." What the HOA didn't know was that he'd been ready for this for months. Kazina, top-tier attorney out of Nashville, had warned him this was coming. "These clowns," his cousin had said, "are going to hang themselves." Court day arrived. The HOA rolled in with their whole entourage, polished shoes, smug faces, convinced they were about to bury him. Then his cousin walked in, calm, confident, carrying a stack of evidence that could choke a mule. The judge, a local. Well, son of a farmer, watched the trail cam footage twice, even asked to replay the part where one inspector fell into the lake. The courtroom laughed. Out came the full story. Letters, threats, trespassing, attempted detainment, count of verified property lines. A timeline of harassment. The HOA's case crumbled like wet cardboard. The judge dismissed everything with prejudice. Then, just to make a point, he fined the HOA for harassment and unlawful trespass. The HOA president turned beachhead, their lawyer, slunk out like a whipped dog. It was over. The next day, the rancher posted one last video. Slow pan of his lake at sunrise, peaceful and golden. Caption: "To all HOA folks who think they own the world, stay off my land." Since then, the road has been quiet. The dock still reflects the morning sun, and the only footsteps on his property are his own. But the caltrops remain by the gate, because, in this country, when the system fails, a man protects what's his.